Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Joining me today, Jack Jablonski. How are you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Jesse.
So we're going to cover a little bit of off-season ground today. We're going to start with an update on the top 10 questions facing the LA Kings in the offseason because we actually have a couple of answers. Not a ton, but a couple. First off, we know that Jim Hiller will return as the head coach. We know that DJ Smith will be on the staff, and now we know that Newell Brown will be on the staff. We've said what we have to say about that. I just want to sort of reset it.
Yep, absolutely.
That's what's happening. At this point, it seems clear that Kasper Siementivel and Juho Markkanen will not be retained by the club. I suppose it's possible down the road that they could return as free agent signings, but as far as their draft rights, those have expired. We don't know what Quentin Byfield's contract will look like. We don't know what will happen with Arvidsson and Roy. We know that David Riddick will return. That's all we know in the goaltending land. And that's really it. So it's only the first two questions out of the top 10. But it's also only June 4th?
Yep.
June 4th. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to play out. Obviously, the most fascinating piece that we're looking into is the roster construction, right? A lot of UFAs, few RFAs. How long do you want to commit to Quentin Byfield? At what price? Is this a bridge deal? Do you go the maximum 7-8 years? Those are things that you have to look at. Obviously, you've got, some UFAs in terms of Victor Arvidsson and Matt Roy. If you don't sign them, what are your expectations? I think one of the areas that I am always so fascinated with is the prospects. How do you draft a guy, whether it's Quentin Byfield's second overall or it's Jordan Spence with the fourth round or whatever? How do you take him and turn him into an NHLer 2-3 years down the road, right? Obviously QB was fast tracked to the NHL for obvious reasons and his skill set. But then you've got guys who can be, viable NHLers that maybe take a few years. And if you're going to pass on re-signing a guy like, Matt Roy or Victor Arvidsson, who takes those spots? Is it another free agent from a different market that we haven't had before? Or do you trust, Akil Thomas to slide in for a Blake Lizotte or, Alex Turcotte to do something? Is Brandt Clark ready to play 82 games and be an offensive and defensive impact? So, two questions we kind of have answers to, or one for sure. The other's, half there. But again, that to me is really intriguing. And obviously, the organization has to make those decisions on where you want to put the money. Whether it's, filling up that $82 million cap space this year, or it's preparing for, 6 years down the road with, who you have on your roster right now. So all of those things kind of have to be addressed. And obviously from management's perspective, they've got, their 1 year plan, their 2, 3, 4, 5 year plan ahead. So super intriguing on where the money goes for sure.
Yeah, and when it comes to the reserve list, like we mentioned, Siementivel and Markkanen, the Kings currently have 13 players drafted whose rights they control that do not have entry-level contracts. Ryan Conmey, Kenny Condors, Alexander Dergachev, Braden Doyle, Jack Hughes, Kirill Kirsanov, Matthew Mania, Ben Meehan, Otto Celine, Bulat Shafigulin, Hampton Slukinski, Jack Sparks, and Jared Wright. I think that's 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it's 13. Ben Meehan has until August 15th of this year, at which point his rights
would expire.
Terminate, yeah. He is 23, I believe, at the moment, and attending college. After that, the next round of players, the next decision that has to be made is June 1st for Matthew Mania of next year. He was just involved in a massive trade today. I don't know if you saw that with the Flint Firebirds. It was like 9 draft picks exchanging hands.
I love how those draft picks go.
Yeah, the CHL trades are wild.
CHL, I'll take Shane Wright for, at the trade deadline for 1 month.
So Matthew Mania, no longer a member of the Sudbury Wolves, now a member of the Flint Firebirds.
Yeah.
And then after that, August 15th, Jack Hughes and Braden Doyle. That's next summer. And then after that, Kenny Connors, Otto Celine, and Jared Wright. We don't have to worry about those 2 years down the road.
Yeah.
So Ben Meehan next up on the list. I just wanted to sort of reset the table because,
of course,
off-season updates are happening. The real conversation I wanted to have with you is a conversation that was 2 people tried to raise the conversation with me the day of the exit interviews.
Okay.
So I think that was the playoffs ended on a Friday night and exit interviews were Sunday.
Saturday maybe something
like maybe I think it was Thursday night.
I think it was
Saturday
they
morning.
Lost on Saturday,
but it was like 24 hours. It was like 36 hours later. Right?
Yeah, I think it was Saturday, and then exit interviews were Monday.
So I'm sitting there waiting for the exit interviews to start, and 2 different people asked me if the Edmonton Oilers go on a deep run.
Yeah,
does it change the way you feel about the Kings losing to the Edmonton Oilers in the first round? And my immediate reaction on day 1 of the offseason was no. It absolutely does not.
Okay.
Now that we're here.
Fast forward a month and change.
Yeah, and the finals are about to begin, and the Edmonton Oilers are about to face off against the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the first time the Oilers have been to the Stanley Cup Final since 2006.
Yep.
The answer for me is still no.
I concur.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
I do concur, because I think you look at a Kings team that in many ways was obviously built to try to beat an Edmonton team, right? Of course, that's not the only way that this team was constructed, but very much knowing that, the way the playoff system is built, you're going to have to go through the division to hopefully get out in front and get to the conference finals and so on. So you look at that team and the way that we lost, I think it's funky because, you and I talked about this. You go 3 years, it was game 7, right? Then last year it goes game 6, and now it's game 5. Did the Kings improve? I believe they improved. Yeah, absolutely, over the last 2 years to a better team. But obviously so did Edmonton. Now, Edmonton has obviously continued to show how good they are and the different ways that they can win, which is something that maybe we didn't see a few years back in their ability to win in different ways. But for the Kings aspect, it doesn't change my opinion because of the way that it kind of unfolded and the ability to separate themselves from handling 2 lines of Edmonton. Of course, we talked about building this team in depth, and that's, in many ways ironic that we say no, because Dallas was supposed to be the team of depth over, 2 lines or 2 superstars. And that didn't work either. But for me, I think for us as an organization, it doesn't change the way you look at it because of the way that the games themselves played out.
For me, it's simpler than that. And it's that the first round loss to the Edmonton Oilers was disappointing.
Yes.
It can't be disappointing if you didn't expect to do better.
Yeah.
When the Kings lost to the Vancouver Canucks in 2010, I didn't care. Because it was the first time they'd been to the playoffs in 8 years or whatever it was. And the team had been bad. And it was like, oh my God, we finally have a defenseman in Drew Doughty. We finally have a forward in Andrei Kopitar. We have Jonathan Quick. We've got Jack Johnson. We've got Dustin Brown. And Vancouver was very, very, very good. I don't think they won the President's Trophy that year, but they might have. And it was like, okay, sure, we lost to the Vancouver Canucks. But this was fun.
Yeah.
This year, we all thought the Kings would do better.
Yep.
And they didn't. So we are disappointed. You can't be disappointed if you didn't have any expectations, just to harp on that.
And I think that goes back.
Thing.
I think it goes back. And again, the man of cliches I'm talking to you right now of happiness is measured by expectation.
Yep.
The way that the season played out, you're a top 5 team essentially till Thanksgiving, right? And then the everything falls apart, right? Obviously, a coach gets fired and the team has to kind of refine itself, refine its identity. But the identity changed because of how simple they had to make the game. And that kind of went back to the 1-3-1 and low-scoring games. Eventually, they find their footing. And then I think the real question is how much did they find their footing at the end of the year? because they got on a roll. They had a great home record, but we didn't play a lot of tough competition. And then you get to an Edmonton team in the playoffs and you're out in 5 games. So it was definitely disappointing because you saw at one point in the season how good this team could be. And I think you look at this roster and how they were playing in October and November, I felt all of us within, the confines of these walls and even on the outside of the fan base and maybe some national expectations was that this team had everything in its place if it was rolling to make a deep run and do exactly what Edmonton did. So for them to not have been able to kind of get back to that and then obviously lose in the way that they did in the playoffs, of course, I think the definition that you went to or the terminology of disappointing is a spot-on analysis.
There's one area that I may change my mind on.
Okay.
And that is the fact that Edmonton blanked Dallas on the power play. So the fact that the Kings didn't score a power play goal against Edmonton, neither did the Dallas Stars, and the Vancouver Canucks connected at 13%. I don't know what the actual numbers were, but
yeah.
Looking at the playoffs, in 7 games, Vancouver went 13% against Edmonton's penalty kill.
Yeah.
LA went 0%. Dallas went 0%.
Yeah, and as a Minnesota Wild fan who played Dallas in the playoffs last year, their power play can score at will.
I was terrified of Dallas. I'm prepared to say, okay, the LA Kings power play might not have been as bad as we thought. It could simply have been that it was a short series, so there were fewer opportunities to begin with. But then also, it turns out Edmonton's penalty kill is actually really, really good. Like Edmonton and Florida have the top 1 and 2.
Yeah, they have like 93% or something.
So okay, I'm okay to listen to that argument.
Yeah.
In that regard, penalty kill,
that's still an issue.
Vancouver was 70%. Dallas was 63.6%. LA was 55%. So we get it. Edmonton's got a very, very good and potent power play that is ultimately unstoppable.
Yeah.
But the Kings could have done a better job stopping.
Yeah, they absolutely can. And then that just goes back to, the 5-on-5 play. You had to win that, and the Kings didn't. And obviously that resulted in, out in 5. But at the same time, the Kings power play took a step in the right direction. We felt it wasn't consistent throughout the year, but it had the ability to be a factor. And of course, you talk about how impressive Edmonton's power play or penalty kill has been. Kudos, right? You have to give credit where credit is due. And, whether you want to complain about 11 or something on the power play in the playoffs, the 5-on-5 numbers are still something that you have to be disappointed with.
Yeah. I have said to a number of different people that the Kings faced 3 different opponents in the first round. The Edmonton Oilers.
Yep.
The officials.
Okay.
And the LA Kings.
Yeah.
And the Kings lost to the Edmonton Oilers.
Yep.
I would argue that the Kings lost to the officials.
Okay.
And I want to be real clear, I'm not making excuses here.
Okay.
Because ultimately, I think the LA Kings lost to the LA Kings.
Yep.
And that's the real issue. The Dallas Stars lost to the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
But I don't think the Dallas Stars lost to the Dallas Stars, if that makes any sense.
I can understand the argument.
You know what I mean? Like, you can go up against a better team and just lose to a better team.
Yeah.
But you can also give a performance that you are not happy with.
Yep.
And I think we heard from General Manager Rob Blake. I think we heard from Coach Jim Hiller. And I think we heard from the players that in their own estimation, they weren't happy with the performance that their team gave.
Of course.
So that's why I say, okay, yes, you could quibble with some calls if you want, but I don't think they lost the series because of the calls.
Nope.
Yes, Edmonton outplayed them. Mm-hmm. But I don't think ultimately that they... Now, maybe they would have lost to Edmonton anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's as simple as saying, oh, well, Edmonton is better. Because if that were the case, again, I don't think we'd use the word disappointing. Yeah. And I don't think we'd have that quote from Blake. I'm trying to find it. It's not available. But he said something along the lines of the desire to win has to be raised within our group.
Yes. And that definitely came off as a sense of disappointment in the way that maybe he felt the players or whoever, we don't know. But we do know that, as you mentioned in Rob Blake's press game, post not postseason,
exit
interviews,
yeah.
the after the season interviews that he did, where he was disappointed in maybe the way that they felt that they represented the organization in terms of effort or execution level. Again, not a fan of always using the E word in effort, but of course they're trying. It's just a matter of, did he feel?
I found the quote.
Okay.
So I'm going to read it verbatim. As Rob Blake said, we'll talk systems, we'll talk details, style of play, and different things. But what we've come to realize, and Jim and I are on the same page here, is that there's a certain desire to win that needs to be raised within our team here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I agree. And I think maybe that's the evolution of Edmonton as well, right? You look at a superstar in McDavid who obviously has lit the league up since he's entered it. Obviously, Draisaitl has very much done the same thing, and you've got tons of other guys on that roster in the top echelon that are very much superstars and making a huge impact. But was there that desperation to play playoff hockey? And I don't know the answer, right? You look at, you have to evolve as a player, and we know that the regular season and the postseason are two different things. And did he feel that effort or that level of need and want to win a Stanley Cup was raised in the playoffs? From that quote, it doesn't sound like he felt that was the case.
I want to drill, this is totally not relative to what we're talking about, but I do kind of want to drill down on the word care, because a lot of times I hear people say like, oh, I care about this, or I don't care about that. Or, like I get teased, amongst our coworkers because I say I don't care about something, and people go, well, you clearly do because you're talking about it endlessly. And I go, all right, fine. But I don't actually, to me, caring about something is measurable in what you're prepared to do about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have a friend who I really admire for this quality. If I'm complaining to him about something, anything, doesn't matter what it is, after he'll give me like a lap or two around the track on the complaint.
Yeah.
And then he'll stop me and he'll say, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And if the answer is nothing, his answer is, then I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Right. And I go like, great. So yeah, I'm sure every player, every member of the coaching staff, I certainly know everybody in the front, the business side of the, yeah, we all care that the team
of course
is in the playoffs and they want to win. The question is, to Rob, the rest of that quote, which goes on and on and on, is what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, we're in the off season, so there's nothing to be done about it. You just have to wait till October and see if anything will change. But
start at the draft.
But I did want to drill down because I'm getting DMs and text messages and stuff from people saying like, well, they're in the final, and I go, they're better than the Kings. We know that. They finished higher in the standings. They have Connor McDavid.
They had the best record in the NHL since whenever Woodcroft got fired. Yeah.
But do I feel better about the first round loss? No, I do not.
I agree.
All right. Let's talk Florida Edmonton in that case.
Shall we?
Obviously, everybody's rooting against Edmonton.
Correct.
Having said all of that, except for Hampton Slukinski, who wasn't picking up what I was putting down when I talked to him. I gave him 2 chances, but that's all right.
Shots fired.
Well, listen, he's a good kid.
Yeah,
but he wasn't
headline of the podcast. Jesse has beef with Kings prospect.
Listen, I love Slukinski. I'm putting all my hope eggs in his basket.
It's because he's Minnesotan. Obviously.
Sure, but is it too simplistic to say this matchup is? I would really love to say this matchup is offense versus defense. Typical, grind it out, smash mouth hockey versus high octane offense only, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is Edmonton's really good defensively. I don't want them to be, but they are.
Yeah, it's such a weird brand, right? Because obviously it's headlined by what they can do offensively, and they don't get credit for what they've been able to do defensively. I go back to game 4 of the Dallas series. Dallas scores 2 goals early in Edmonton to take a 2-0 lead. They're already up 2-1 in the series. And from that point on, it was a different Edmonton team. Not only was it an Edmonton team that pushed like crazy and, was essentially just, all offense, but they just didn't allow anything on the defensive end. And, of course, the topic of Stuart Skinner and how good is he, so on and so forth. The reality is he made 55 of the last 56 shots he's faced in the series, something along the lines. And a team that has so much talent in Dallas had 10 shots in the last game in a do or die situation. So, of course, you have an Edmonton that is clicking on all cylinders. It'll be interesting now because I personally believe that Florida was the best team in the NHL, and that was my choice to win the Stanley Cup. Will they be able to handle that? It's a different type of game. I think that you look at Florida's style and how they play the game is much more identical to Vancouver, but with more skill and more depth.
More sandpaper too?
More sandpaper. Yes.
More of everything.
More of everything. I think they were just a better version of what Vancouver was this year in every category. A better goaltender, better offense, more depth, more reliable, and a team that's built for playoff hockey. Now, I think Vancouver is also built for playoff hockey, but didn't have the offense that it needed, like what we've seen in continuous appearances with this Florida Panthers team over the last 2 years. So it'll be very interesting because we know that Edmonton struggles when things get mucked up. Vancouver did it, and it was a perfect example of how to make life hell. The Kings wanted to do that, but I don't think this Kings roster had enough sandpaper.
So that's interesting. The one thing I've noticed about Edmonton, and you tell me if you see this or not.
Yeah.
I couldn't bring myself to watch a lot of the games with them because I just couldn't.
Yeah.
But when I watched them play Dallas, I don't want to say it looked like Dallas had given up, but it looked like Edmonton was in control most of the time I watched.
Yeah.
And the moment that I felt that the Kings-Oilers series was over, I think you and I have talked about this before, was I believe it was game 3 when the Kings were down and England got in a fight at center ice.
Uh-huh.
And my attitude was, it's a 1-1 series.
Yep, I know. Yeah.
Edmonton has the lead. The last thing they should be interested in is giving the Kings any kind of emotional
boosts
at
all,
home. Right?
Yeah.
Like you should just walk away from this and not be interested because it can only help the team.
They just said, bring it on.
And they were just like, whatever. We don't care. And
Yeah.
then the rest of the series, even though Connor McDavid finished the series with 12 points in 5 games, I just felt like he wasn't really trying. Like, it's not that he wasn't trying, but I just felt like he wasn't engaged in the game. He was just sort of like, we're going to win this. Who cares? So I'm watching the Dallas series after Edmonton has the lead, and I'm just like, it's not that Dallas gave up. It's just, it felt like once Edmonton takes a lead, they know how good they are. Mm-hmm. And they know that in order for you to crawl back into the series, you're not only going to have to outscore their defense, but you're also going to have to prevent Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, etc., from growing the lead or flipping the lead again, or like, okay, fine, you tie it up, we're just going to go back out.
Edmonton plays such a unique style of hockey that if the game is dictated on their terms, then it's very hard for other teams to be able to keep up. Mm-hmm. But because, you look at, I think it's because of how unique they are. I think it's very evident on who has control, right? So because Florida is willing to play any type of hockey, they have the ability to take the dictation of what Edmonton wants to do out of their hands. Not in a 7-game series or a 4-game series where they would sweep them or anything in this aspect. They have the ability to say to Edmonton, you're not going to be able to do that to us. And I think for whatever reason in games 4, 5, and 6 in that series against Dallas, Edmonton took it over and Dallas didn't know how to take it back. And I think that with Florida, because of the way they play, the talent they have, the grit, the sandpaper, the ability to play any type of hockey, they have the ability to not allow Edmonton to dictate the game for long periods of time. And I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to see as we head into this Stanley Cup, because Florida, to me, is the better team, but you have a team in Edmonton that is finally putting it all together and feels like this is it. It's been Stanley Cup or bust. They've said it since the beginning of the season. Now they're here and they're playing their best hockey, and they just shut down a team that a lot of people didn't give them a chance to win. So now they've proven everyone wrong in the Western Conference Finals. Why can't they do it again? And you've got, again, the two most talented players in the game right now playing at an all-time level and clicking at an all-time level. And what we hadn't seen compared to the previous years is they're not on the same line very often anymore.
Well,
so you can spread the wealth.
It used to be a break glass for emergency move.
Exactly.
Now it's not.
Yeah.
Now that Hyman has turned into a friggin' Maurice Rocket Richard.
Yeah.
In the Kings series, I think the only lead changes in the series happened in Game 5. I would love to know, I haven't looked it up, I don't even know how to look it up. I would love to know how many lead changes there were in the Vancouver and Dallas series.
Yeah.
Because Edmonton feels like a team that if they get out on a lead on you, you're in trouble.
Yeah, playing catch up against Edmonton is dangerous because of their ability to just.
But I wonder.
You have to you playing Edmonton, of course, against any team when you're trailing, especially in the third period, you have to take risks. The only difference is when you take a risk against Edmonton, the people that you're risking it against, if it doesn't go your way, it's almost a foregone conclusion that it's over.
But I wonder if Florida can grab an early lead. Will they be able to maintain it? Because Florida,
I think
it's not a
do.
huge gap. Florida, and it's the playoffs, so it's like super small sample sizes. But goals against per game, Florida 2.29, Edmonton 2.61. And their penalty kills, obviously Edmonton's is better, but Florida's is right up there at 88.
It's 1 and 2, yeah.
So can Florida? I mean, that's what it sort of comes down. That's what it feels like to me: is can Florida stop Edmonton as opposed to can Edmonton stop Florida?
Yeah,
which is silly because Florida's really good.
I know, right? I think Florida can very much stop Edmonton. They have a goaltender that is as good as any when he's on, and he's been great in the playoffs. So you've got a guy who's won the Vezina, who's obviously been to the finals before, knows what it takes, hasn't been able to lift the trophy yet, but obviously looking in front of his best opportunity yet. Now you move to Edmonton's ability to stop Florida. I think that's an intriguing one because while Skinner stopped, he's given up 1 goal in the last, 8 periods, I believe, something like that, or so on, in that area. Mm-hmm. Florida has a different way of going about it, where Dallas could not get to the front of the net, and good luck keeping Matthew Tkachuk outside of the crease. It's not just him. You've got Sam Bennett. You've got Andre Barkov. You've got Verhaeghe.
Alex Barkov.
What did Andre?
Yeah.
My bad.
It happens.
Alexander, Sasha Barkov. There's a ton of talent on this roster. And we said that about Dallas, but this is a different type of sandpaper that I think is going to be a very interesting matchup against the defenseman and obviously Stuart Skinner of the Edmonton Oilers.
This is a dumb stat that doesn't mean anything. But in the playoffs, I want to say there have been 14 rounds or matchups, whatever. All but 2 of the playoff series that have happened. The team that had the higher Corsi for percentage in the regular season won the series.
Interesting.
The cases where it didn't happen, the Rangers beat the Hurricanes.
Yep.
The Hurricanes were tops in the league at 59.5. The Rangers were, 50.11. So that was an outlier.
Yep.
And Boston beat Toronto. Boston.
That was a weird series.
Yeah. Actually, I might even be wrong about that. No, I am right. Boston beat Toronto. So Boston was actually 47.3, and Toronto was 50.95. Now, again, doesn't mean anything. It's just a weird coincidence. However, Florida, second overall in the league, 55.7. Edmonton, third, 55.18.
So a toss-up to me.
So very close. If we want to look at expected goals, Edmonton tops in the league, expected goals for percentage, 57.09. Florida, fifth, 54.32. Unfortunately, Kings, fourth, 54.56.
Basically, what I'm gathering from your numbers is that these two teams are very good.
Super good. No, absolutely.
You've got a Florida team that has been debatably the best team all year, and you've got an Edmonton team who, since firing their coach, statistically was the best team of all of the year.
And no shock, I think that Florida has been marginally better than Edmonton defensively and goaltending, but in the playoffs, Edmonton's penalty kill has been way better.
Well,
and
way better.
Obviously Edmonton has the offensive edge.
Yes, but
Florida has very good offensive players and Edmonton has very good defense.
Yeah, so it's a total toss-up, and that's what's going to be great about this series, because you have two very different types of teams. Who's going to be able to control the play? Obviously, that'll be a huge dictation towards who can win. And then the big thing is the consistency of what Stuart Skinner has done in the last 2.5 games going to happen, starting game 1 all the way through how long the series goes? Or do we have a few of those hiccups like they did against the Avalanche? Because if that happens, then good luck beating, a Florida team that obviously has been here. They haven't done it, but they've been there before. They know what it takes. And this is a very deep team that is not easy to play against and has everything that you could ask for in terms of construction. So I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be great. I would say my pick is going to be Florida in 6. But I am intrigued because I think it's going to be an awesome series in terms of the style of play.
I would like it to be. Well, I don't want either team to win for various different reasons. However, that's not an option. So I want it to be Florida.
Yep.
I want it to be Florida in 4 because, like I said, I don't like watching the Edmonton
Rip the heart out of Edmonton fans.
I just want it to be done. I just want it to be over.
You're part Canadian. You don't even root for Canada.
I don't know, whatever.
You flip sides in the Olympics, which is not fair.
I will always root for Canada in international competition. And there's no real...
This is international. It's Canada versus USA.
No, it's not really. But what I want to talk about, and I've become obsessed with this lately, and there's no conclusion to this obsession. In my way of thinking, there's 3 different ways of playing effective defense. One way is to have an offense that always has the puck and is always going the other direction, right? So ipso facto, your defensive numbers will be good because the other team never has the chance to be in your zone. One way of playing it is to clog up the neutral zone and prevent the other team from ever really generating good opportunities.
Sounds very familiar, Jesse.
In your zone. And then the third one is to just be good in your own zone.
Yeah.
And this is an oversimplification, but for example, Vegas, right? You have guys like McNabb and Martinez who just eat pucks all day long. Morning, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They just eat pucks. They just block shots. That's what they do. They get in shooting lanes.
Yeah.
Then you have teams that play, a stifling neutral zone system that it's all about preventing opportunities and, defense through math, essentially. And that's, I think, sort of more of what the Kings system has been recently. And then there's teams that there's just offensive powerhouses. I would love to say that that's just the Edmonton Oilers, but I don't think it is anymore.
No, they've developed. It was 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it was funny because after Game 6 on the TNT interview, it was kind of funny. The first question to Connor McDavid in the postgame when they were talking on the panel was, 2-3 years ago, I didn't think you could win games like this.
Right.
Because it was like 2-1. And obviously McDavid kind of sarcastically rolled his eyes. But that was the reality of this was an Edmonton team that was all offense. They could win games 7-6. And I think that was the interesting thing for the Kings, because I think we looked at it and it was like, okay, if we're in a tight game, we're comfortable. They're nervous because they're not they're afraid of their goaltending. They're inconsistent. Kings are obviously used to playing the 1-goal games, all of that. So I thought it was really interesting because that isn't the case anymore. And they've proven that. They won a few goal games against the Kings. They obviously played tight series against both Dallas and Colorado. But they've won games this whole postseason and weighed in many different forms. And that's something that this Edmonton team has not done in the past. So it's going to be interesting because we've all felt like that was the advantage for the other team, but they've continued to prove everyone wrong in the categories that we felt Edmonton was flawed.
So in the regular season, this is my favorite stat that I discovered last year. Apologies for everybody who's listening to me talk about it again. Percentage of shot attempts blocked by teammates.
Okay.
And the reason I just find it interesting, but also if you look through it, you can find certain teams' goalies clumped together, which suggests to me that's how that team plays. So, for example, Philip Gustafson and Marc-Andre Fleury are right next to each other. 22.53%, 22.28%.
Yep.
Minnesota blocks shots.
Yes.
That's what that says to me.
Yep.
That's what they do. Right at the top of the list, Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill. Logan Thompson, 24%. Yeah. Aiden Hill, 23.34%.
That team was insane.
That's what Vegas does. They block shots. That's the regular season. Switching over to the playoffs, I have to shrink the thing here. Stuart Skinner, 24.32%.
Yeah.
That's a huge step up in the playoffs than what it was in the regular season, but that means a quarter of the shot attempts that Stuart Skinner is facing.
Don't go anywhere near him.
The Oilers are eating those pucks.
Yeah.
His teammates are blocking those shot attempts. That's
not the Edmonton Oilers team that we knew 2-3 years ago. Again, credit to GM Ken Holland. Obviously, he built the dynasty in Detroit. He had a large task to take on in terms of expectations with what Edmonton wanted to be and where they were when he stepped in. You hate to say he's done an amazing job because of, our history with them, but they've really proved a lot of people wrong. They've brought in a lot of sandpaper, Corey Perry's, Evander Kane's. It's not just 7-6 hockey as it once was in Edmonton, and their ability to win multiple games in different ways is what's led them to the Stanley Cup Finals. It'll be interesting to see if it can end with a cup above their heads. But you've got a Florida team that is willing to play any type of hockey and is very comfortable with a very good head coach that has his team rolling as well at an ultra high confidence level.
And of the 4 teams that played in the conference final, Ottinger led with percentage of shot attempts blocked by teammates, then Stuart Skinner, then Igor Shesterkin, then Sergei Bobrovsky. So
interesting.
Yeah. Now it's one isolated stat. It doesn't necessarily mean anything by itself. I'd have to dig deep. As I've said time and time again, any single stat should just be the starting point of a story that you're trying to tell. You shouldn't just look at one stat and be like, well, that's the story. That's it. Yeah. But again, Edmonton, and it's so funny. Like Ekholm is the kind of guy on a bad team. Ekholm would be your star. Like in the years that the Kings were bad, Matthias Nordstrom was one of the highlights that we had to talk about. As soon as you get a player who's even a little bit flashy or skilled or talented, Matthias Nordstrom's a great, foundation to build him on, whatever. But Ekholm, nobody ever talks about Ekholm because you've got McDavid and Draisaitl and Hyman and Nugent Hopkins and Perry and Kane, who you can talk about their personalities and, do you like them or not? Whatever. Yeah. Bouchard's got an incredible slap shot, and Darnell Nurse, what's up with his contract, and blah, blah. Yeah. And then you're just like, by the way, Matthias Ekholm.
No, that was it was such an impactful trade at the deadline last year, a year and change ago. And for him to kind of come in, be that hard to play against, guy can play 20 plus minutes a game. He's obviously on that top pair with Evan Bouchard. It allows Bouchard. Here's this comparison, and Jesse, I'll let you use your Kings history. Who do you feel was that defenseman during the cup runs, whether it's 12 or 14 or in that era, that allowed Drew Doughty to be Drew Doughty?
Yeah, well, so it's funny.
Because that's the comparison I have for allowing Evan Bouchard to play offensive. Step up in the play. Guess what? Why? You screw up, you turn it over. You've got Matthias
Scuderi is the answer.
Rob Scuderi, right. So that allows Evan Bouchard, and again, we know what he's done on the power play. Tons of their points have come from the man up, but he's also played phenomenal on 5-on-5 hockey. And every team's recipe felt that, okay, if you can try to somehow play even hockey on the power play, you have a huge advantage against the Edmonton Oilers because you can beat them 5-on-5. Not the case anymore. And a lot of that credit can go to a guy like Matthias Ekholm. And that's kind of the difference maker. He's one of the many pieces that they have brought in that has had a huge impact on this team's success and built the kind of identity that we didn't know if it was possible in that locker room because of some of the skill that they had and the type of hockey that they had been playing.
And I don't want to sound like a typical salty anti-Oilers fan. However, Ekholm Bouchard is such an incredibly good pair.
Yeah.
And Nurse Ceci and Kulak Desharnais or Kulak Ceci, whatever, are so unimpressive. But those guys, you know,
Yeah.
you roll that top line out, and all you need from your other lines is just don't get caved in.
Yeah.
And
it works.
yeah. So anyway, obviously we're all rooting for the Panthers. Appreciate you guys listening. We're going to come back next week with the final forward evaluations. Then we're going to start looking forward to the draft. Then once the draft happens, we'll have dev camp and
Plenty of
draft
coverage coming your way.
Yeah, all
It's been a
sorts
little
of
bit
stuff.
of a funky time of year, obviously.
Yeah.
When we're out and the cup still goes, but
And one of the silver linings of us from a content perspective is because there's so many holes that need to be filled on the roster, after July 1st, because this team, I'm not the first person to say it, but like we will sign a bunch of unrestricted free agents. Not all of them might play for the Kings. They might just be to fill out the Reign roster.
Yep.
But
We're going to talk about it.
yeah, and we need a number one goalie. We
Yep.
need to figure out what to do with all the
Hampton's
RFAs. We need to fill out, there's roster spots. So there'll be stuff to talk about. Thank you for listening, Kings fans. We will talk to you very soon.